Hello, my friends, and welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. I'm your host, Cherie Burton. If there's no other episode you share with your friends, please share this one. Perhaps one of the most powerful conversations I've ever had. I know it's going to help some of you who may be wondering, what's the point? And what do we have to look forward to? And where's this life really taking me? Jeff Olsen has a really poignant and powerful near-death experience that we'll share parts of with you. And before we bring Jeff on, I just want to read something to you that is kind of a segue into my discussion with Jeff. And this is from an email I received from someone in Europe. She said, "Hi, Sheree, I've been listening to many of your brilliant podcasts, and I'm so impressed. I always feel deeply inspired by the conversations. I particularly love the piece you did on Richard Rohr. I've listened to it 5 times so far. Really amazing. Keep up your great work. The podcast is completely brilliant. Well done, soul sister." The episode she's referring to is episode 13, the one that I did on leaving the first half of life, reflections on my soul shift, which if you've been listening to any of my discussions, any of my podcasts, you'll know that I've been undergoing a lot of transition, a lot of reflection, a lot of pondering and searching and seeking. As we move forward in this discussion with Jeff, maybe just check in and breathe and ask yourself, where am I? How do I feel about life? How do I feel about my relationships? How do I feel about myself? And now I commence this long but very worth it discussion with Jeff Olsen, who also happens to be the creative director for BYU-tv. Jeff, thank you so much for the privilege of talking to you. I feel like I mean, you and I have had some conversations in private, but also when I read your book, Knowing, I felt like you're my brother.
Oh, thank you. It's such, it's a privilege. It's an honor. I'm thrilled to be on your show and chatting with you today. It's more like a conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what we're going to do, because you and I really think alike. And I did not have a near-death experience that I know of. Or have consciousness around. But I think let's just start there, because with some of the things you and I have discussed, you're now seeing the world with a new lens. I feel like I'm coming out of some awakening I've had where I'm out of the dark night of the soul, or whatever you want to call it, where I'm seeing things with a new lens and a new pair of glasses, if you will, a new perspective. But if you want to just kind of encapsulate, and maybe we'll circle back here and there to come back to some pivotal pieces of your near-death experience, because it really is such a beautiful story. Share with us in a nutshell, if you can. I know it's multi-layered.
The Reader's
What
Digest version.
happened? Yeah, tell us what happened and why this is such a special near-death experience. Then I'll kind of add here and there as I saw what I perceived.
And I will paraphrase, and I'll begin with what one does not need to have a near-death experience to have a spiritual awakening or a new insight or a progression of the soul.
Right.
For me, and I'll cut to the chase. I was in a horrific automobile accident. It's been over 20 years ago now. The whole family was in the car. We were on a family vacation. And I lost control of the car, and the car rolled not off the road, but down the road at 75 miles an hour. I had the cruise control set. In the car was myself, my wife, and our 2 young boys in the back seat. My youngest at 14 months old in his car seat, and Spencer, my 7-year-old, in a kind of a booster seat, and then Tamara was in her passenger seat, and I was driving. Everyone was buckled in. Everyone was in the appropriate restraints. However, Tamara had laid her seat back and was taking a nap, as Griffin, my youngest, had also fallen fast asleep in his car seat.
And how old was he?
14 months. He was just learning to walk and saying his first few little words.
Such a precious age.
Oh, and he was our miracle boy. I mean, we were told we may not have more children. We had gone through in vitro to get him here. and what a joy. And I'll touch on that, because there was some moments before the accident that in hindsight have become so vivid and so important. But I was driving down the road, as I said, cruise control set on 75, which is as fast as I could legally go. I was simply checking traffic in the rearview mirror. Just when you just glance to see what's going on behind you. But in that moment, and here again, moments are so precious that they're sacred. But in that moment, in my glance to look at traffic in the rearview mirror, which there was none at that point, I noticed Griffin, who was sound asleep in his car seat. That's how I knew he was sleeping. And it's like time just stood still. I just felt that little boy, that precious miracle that had come into this world, and what a blessing he was in my life, and how much I loved him, our connection. I noticed crazy little details. I noticed his fingernails and how his hands were resting on the car seat barrier there in front of him. And I noticed how long his eyelashes were. And I just felt this intense connection and love for him. I then noticed Spencer, my 7-year-old, in the seat behind me. And he was playing with action figures and making all the joyful sounds of a little boy. And then I looked at Tamara, who had reclined her seat back and also was sound asleep, but was still holding onto my hand. And it was this complete moment of gratitude. And I say moment because it really was. It was like a glance in the rearview mirror, but there was this awareness, this consciousness of, wow, what did I ever do to deserve all this? And could life be any better? Really, it's like, here was my wife holding my hand the same way she had on our first date when I had a couple extra bucks in my pocket and took her to a dollar movie as a starving, college student. And these beautiful, healthy boys in the back seat. And it was just this moment in hindsight that was magical. Time stood still. It was an hour after that or so, maybe more time, that and the hardest part about the story, Cherie, is I believe I dozed off. I think I just dozed off for a second. The car swerved. I overcorrected. I lost control and the car rolled. I blacked out for most of that. When the car came to a stop, I was completely conscious. The first thing I heard was Spencer crying, my 7-year-old in the back seat, hysterical. But I thought, oh my goodness, good, he's okay. And I was unaware of my injuries, except I knew I was struggling to breathe. I knew I was hurt. I was in intense pain. What had actually happened is both of my legs had been crushed. My left leg was amputated above the knee. My back had been damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My rib cage had been damaged. My right arm had nearly been pulled off. There was no muscle through the rotator cuff or anything attached. And then the seatbelt had cut through me and had ruptured all my intestines, all my insides. In fact, I was, and forgive the graphic nature, I was torn open, like from my belly button clear down my left thigh, literally exposing my femoral artery. That by some miracle was not severed, or I'd have bled out right at the scene. But the horrific part is, as I thought, I've got to get to Spencer, I've got to get to my son, he's crying, and I realized I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, I was losing consciousness. That's when I realized that no one else was crying. And it's still hard to talk about sometimes, but I knew in that moment that Tamara and Griffin were gone. I was aware that Tamara was gone. Griffin, actually, his car seat had broken up and he'd been thrown from the car. And my panic was, oh my gosh, where's my little boy? And reality just told me, it's like spirit spoke and said, he's gone. He's gone. I knew they were gone. It was the worst hell a man could ever be in.
I cannot even imagine.
I'm losing consciousness. I've got a hysterical 7-year-old. and I was driving the car, and half the family's passed, and the guilt, the horror, the trauma, the fear, the absolute panic. Just can't I take those 5 seconds back, you know?
Mm.
Um, and I outline that not to be graphic, but to set the precedence for what happened next, which was a strange thing because it felt as if light came and surrounded me and comforted me in the worst moment of my life. But I began to rise above the scene of the accident, and suddenly I was okay. I could breathe. I was not in pain. There was this intense peace and love around me. And then Tamara, who I knew was deceased at the scene, she was there with me in this bubble of light, if you will. Except she was emphatic about me having to come back. And I'm going to leave out a lot of details in the sake of time.
But if people read the book, it's so beautifully woven, because I remember one thing that stood out to me is when you passed with her, there was a lot of emotion. Yeah. Like, it was like, are we dead? Like, it was kind of that, did we die?
I was like, what happened? What just happened? I was in a crash and now you're here and you're.
But she was so torn. She had that knowing, which is the name of your book, that you needed to come back as much as you both love each other.
Yeah.
It was like, no. So she had that knowing that it was her time, but not yours, which I found very poignant.
I did. I mean, she was pleading with me. You got to go back. You've got to go back. You can't come. You've got to go back. And yet in all of that, there was a choice. I mean, I suppose I could have stayed, but here I was, and I learned a lot about choice. Here I was looking at the woman I loved more than life. And yet I knew I had a little boy in the backseat of that car who was okay. I knew he was crying and okay. And I chose to come back. I made the choice. And that was very interesting because as I did that, I actually found myself wandering through a hospital. I did not return to the car or the scene of the accident. I returned to a hospital wherein I was seeing the patients, the doctors, the nurses, the families of the patients. They had, I had no concept of time in this goodbye with Tamara. What I found out later happened. People had arrived at the scene of the accident. I was rushed to a local hospital. Spencer was not badly hurt. He was banged up pretty good, but he basically walked away from the scene of the accident physically, but emotionally, he thought he had lost his whole family. The local hospital knew they could not deal with my injuries, so I was life-flighted to a level 1 trauma center in Salt Lake City. And that's where I landed. All I knew is I'd wrecked the car. I'd said the most poignant goodbye I would ever say. And there I was wandering through the hospital, seeing a busy level 1 trauma center. But every person I looked at, every person I encountered, I knew them absolutely perfectly. I knew their love, I knew their hate, I knew their motivations, I knew their anxieties. I knew them as if they were me. There was this absolute connected oneness. And there was so much love. I was seeing them as these magnificent brothers and sisters in a way I'd never experienced. And I loved them. And it was really interesting that it didn't matter who they were or what they had done or what they hadn't done. I mean, from the heroin addict to the saintly grandmother, I just had this compassion. And I had this absolute empathy for everything that had happened that either landed them as the heroin addict or had led them down the path of being the saintly grandmother. It was this absolute connectedness.
Would you have considered yourself someone who was judgmental prior to this? Someone who would have maybe looked upon that as, oh my gosh, they're not going to make it. Oh my gosh, like.
Oh, yes. And in fact, I don't know that I was ever judgmental. I think by nature I've been a kind being. Mm-hmm. But always I committed to being right. I had it right.
That's it right there.
I had it right. And I was better than or more blessed than or privileged or grateful that I had it right. And that, oh gosh, these poor other people, what's going to happen to them? And so there was never, it wasn't a judgment out of arrogance. It was a judgment out of compassion. But I was
like that poor person. They're missing the mark. They don't have the right way.
here's the interesting thing, and this was very poignant in my experience, because that's how I was before, and here I was seeing with different eyes. I'm obviously outside of my body, because I'll touch on that. I later found my body in the hospital. But as I encountered these people, these beings, these souls, these connected brothers and sisters of mine, and there was a biblical verse that came to me. I'd come up in a conservative Christian home, and the biblical verse was the famous one where the master said, "Inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me." And I used to think that was a nice verse about being nice. But I'll tell you what, in this connectedness, what I realized was being said is, they are me. I am no better than the man in prison. I am no better than the naked beggar on the street. We are one. And I'm not doing this as a counsel of what to do for others. I'm doing this saying literally, we're connected. I am them. They are me. And I was experiencing that. I was the heroin addict. I was the saintly grandmother. We were absolutely equal, bonded, and there were no stepchildren in God's family suddenly. And that was a shift for me. And I had this awareness, this oneness of, wow. Judgment and comparisons just went out the window. They no longer existed. And it was a big shift in my life.
And I've kind of made it a hobby of mine to read near-death experience books. And I would say that is the underlying universal thread that I've never read one book or listened to one YouTube on someone who's had this experience of crossing over and did not come back seeing with the lens of, it's just about love. That's it. That's all there is.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of funny. I mean, Bible reading people and people who love scripture or ancient records of any kind. I mean, if you want to read, it's very evident. I mean, read what this fellow we call Jesus taught. There was two debtors. One owed 50, one owed 500. At the end of the day, when they could pay nothing, they were both freely forgiven. The vineyard, some worked all day, some worked for the last hour. At the end of the day, they were all paid exactly the same wage. I mean, you could go through and through the prodigal son or anything else. And even, that's what I'm talking about. Jesus teaching these stories, these parables of unity, of equality, of unconditional love. There are no
radical acceptance, radical inclusion.
Radical inclusion. And even if you get into Paul and later, later Gospels, I mean, Corinthians 13, all prophecy, all faith, all of that is going to go away. It will not, it doesn't matter. All that matters is charity or love or pure love or unconditional love. And I'm wondering what love is not unconditional. If it's not unconditional, is it love?
Exactly.
Or is it judgment? I mean, that's, it's an interesting.
Yeah. I remember reading that scripture on charity and being so befuddled when I was younger. Like, wait, you can walk on water and move mountains and prophesy and raise people from the dead and do all these amazing things. But if you don't have charity, like the mark was being missed. It was like running past me. I didn't get it. And I know you and I have talked about this, structures and belief systems, which you told me before stand for BS.
Well, and I say that for a specific reason. Yeah, a belief system. I mean, beliefs are beliefs. You believe it, but I think truth could be far from a belief. I mean, there's so many diverse beliefs, and right. My beliefs have even shifted over time. I used to believe in Santa Claus. Yeah. I believed in the Easter Bunny. I mean, with all my heart. It was heartbreaking. And in fact, I perpetuated that. Gosh, I did so many Santa Claus tricks with my children and tracks in the snow and deer droppings. I mean, and it was fun, but it was a belief. Yeah. And I can find symbols in all of that. I now tell my little nieces and nephews, well, I believe in the spirit of Santa Claus to give unconditionally and to show up in a way. But yeah, beliefs shift, right? I mean, it's a belief.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it's true.
And it's it's because there's very little things that we actually know for a fact are real.
Yeah. And that's
And
that. Yeah.
that's why your book's title is perfect, because what was the knowing? If you could just encapsulate, because I know there's so much to your story, like you had this beautiful crossing over experience with your daughter or with your wife, and then you came back to this body that was in so much pain, and then dealing, with the loss of your wife and your young son, and then having to rebuild with Spencer, your 7-year-old, and the trauma he had experienced. And then you had another poignant experience with seeing Griffin, your young toddler son. Do you want to take us through that? And then we'll kind of tie it back to like the knowing, like what was that knowing?
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because that was the most profound thing. And it was at the end of my hospital stay. I was out of ICU, and I was in the hospital for months, but I was out of ICU. I was out of surgical recovery. I had had horrible infections. I kept throwing pulmonary embolisms, the blood clots that lodge in your lungs. I had massive, pneumonias. But I had worked through all that. I had gotten out of ICU. I'd got through surgical recovery. I was finally in the rehabilitation wing of the hospital, and I had that experience. I felt that light come, just like at the accident, and I felt myself rise above the hospital bed. And suddenly the light went away. It dispensed like a fog or like a mist. It just went away, and I was in the most incredible, beautiful place. I was alone. Tamara wasn't there this time, but I was so elated. I was so happy. I began to run. Now, in my younger life, I'd been a Division I athlete. I was a red personality, kick butt, take names, get it done type of guy. But I knew now in this life, with an amputated leg and a crushed right leg and an injured back and hips with trouble, I knew I wasn't going to be running in this realm, but in that realm, I was running. And I was so joyful. And it was so physical. It was so physical. I could feel everything. It's as if I could feel every cell in my body, and yet I seemed to be out of the body. I could feel the warm ground under my feet and the energy charging up through my calves and thighs as I ran joyfully, thinking, and it's funny, my thought was, I'm home. I'm home. That's the only word I can come up with. I was home. Mm-hmm. And I was running about, feeling in a very intense physical way. And I did have the knowing that I wasn't there to stay. I wasn't there to stay. And about that time, I became aware of that. There was this corridor that I knew I was to go down. So I made my way down the corridor. And at the end of the corridor was a crib. And as I rushed to the crib and looked in the crib, there was my little boy. There was Griffin, sleeping as peacefully and as beautifully as he was when I peeked in the rearview mirror before the accident. And I can't emphasize, I swept him up, and it was so physical. I could feel the weight of his body. I could feel the heat of his body. Have you ever picked up a sleeping child?
Yeah, they're like a little furnace.
I felt his body solid against mine. I began to feel his rib cage expanding with breath. I felt his breath on my neck, and I leaned in and smelled his hair. And I thought, it's him. He's fine. He's okay. I began to weep, just holding him, thinking, wow, it's just like it was before. He's beautiful, and he's fine, and he's not hurt, and he's, all these things that race through the head of a father, and I'm sure a mother too. But as I held him, weeping, thinking, do I really get to say goodbye to him? Or do I even have to go? Am I here to stay? Knowing that I also had a son in this realm that needed me desperately. But I began to feel this intense presence come up behind me. And this was even more overwhelming than the hospital experience. Because suddenly this being, this feeling, this overwhelming presence was so big and so cosmic and so powerful. I began to become fearful. I began to have that guilt come back. I was thinking, my little boy is here because I lost control and crashed the car. He's dead because of my mistake. wow, could I ever be forgiven? Because I was fearful knowing that I was in the presence of God. And as I had those feelings, I felt this presence come closer and closer and closer. And this felt physical too. Suddenly I felt those divine arms wrap around and hold me and my little boy. And there was just this pure feeling of knowledge. All that fear, because I believed that life was a test, that God was going to test me, that God had done this to me, that I was being tripped up to see how I would react. And I'd done my best, but I probably felt like I was failing the test. And yet in those arms, that all went away. And it was communicated so purely that life was not a test. Life was a gift. Life was an absolute gift. And that everything that had happened was in perfect divine order. And here's the switch. God said, I know that might sound funny to say God said, but what was communicated to me is we didn't do any of this. You did. You created it, and we loved you enough to support it. And Tamra loved you enough to go. Griffin loved you enough to go. Spencer loved you enough to stay. It's all in perfect divine order. And it's for you, by you. This is your creation, and we love you enough to support it. And I, although that didn't make sense, I was feeling all that. And I did see my life. I saw the things that I thought were mistakes. And in those divine arms, there were no mistakes. I saw things that were wrong, and I did them anyway. And in those divine arms, all I felt was, look how much we love you. Look how perfect you are. Look how divine you are. I was holding my little boy. And, he was just learning to walk and talk and, slobbering and saying silly little one-word phrases. And I realized in those arms, that's what we are. All of heaven just says, look, our children are learning to walk as we fumble through life, doing our best or doing what we choose to. And I'll cut to the chase, but I was also taught about choice. I was taught I could be angry at God. And yet in all that, as I'm sitting there saying, gosh, I'm having the feeling that I'm perfect, that I'm divine. I'm being told that. I knew that all of humanity was. I was no different than no one was special, and yet everyone was special. And I was having this intense thing. And then there was this choice. I could be mad at God and feel like he tore my family away or caused this, and that was okay. I could be mad at myself and dwell in the guilt I was experiencing my whole life and beat myself up, and that was okay. We love you anyway. Or I had the choice, and this was given to me. You can give your son back. You can let him go. You can pass him over, and therefore your will is honored. Your free will is honored. And this was very interesting, because as I shuddered at that and said, oh no, Father, I thought it was your will. I was told, my will is your will. My will is free will, and I honor it, and I love you.
That's beautiful.
And in all that love, I kissed my little boy on the face and gave him back. And then I woke up in the hospital bed wondering why I ever let go. I should have just held on. But I learned a lot, and we can move on. But there was profound experiences that shifted my consciousness, that altered my beliefs. And yet I won't even say altered it. It's as if my beliefs, my faith, became absolute trust. Suddenly there wasn't a right or a wrong way. There was absolute trust in an absolute unconditional love. And I was to be that. I was to embody that. I was to come back into this realm and manifest that unconditional love that I had felt. And that was not easy. It was easy any day.
Yeah, because I can imagine, being, as you mentioned, raised more Orthodox or more strict religious observances or ways of looking at things. And I see this pretty much across the board throughout much of Christianity, but I think you could do this with any religion, whether it's Buddhism or Judaism or what have you, that there's just like our way, right? Like there's one way. And if you don't go into this narrow stream of it, well, too bad for you. It's half a life or half a eternity. And that's your lot. So tell me how that shifted for you.
Well, here's the thing. If my life is my creation and God honors it, then everyone else's is.
Mhm.
Even if it doesn't look like mine, even if it's drastically different than mine. And I've realized it's the perfection's in the diversity. The perfection lies within the chaos, and it's our judgment of it that makes it imperfect. I mean, when I was looking at my own life and saying, "Oh, no, 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 that, yeah, I knew that. I did that anyway. That was a mistake. That was wrong." Literally, the God that held me said, "That's your judgment of it, not mine.
Mm.
It's perfect for you and the growth of your soul." And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I suppose a belief I've let go of is that there's one way.
Mhm.
I've completely embraced that there's my way, and I can embrace my truth, and I can live my life according to my choice. But at the same time, I get to honor everyone else's and not find it bad, sick, or wrong, or not find it contrary to what is right, to simply honor that there's diversity, that there is belief systems, but the reality is that we're connected, we're one, and we are loved beyond our comprehension, no matter what.
Yeah. And kind of going back to what I started with when I said, well, I never had a near death. I actually did, in the sense that I had to, a part of me that was thinking there was a right way had to die. And when I entered that dark night of the soul, it was me entering a construct where I was trying to bring a baby into our home who had been through the foster care system, and was supposed to adopt her at birth. It's a long story, but she's now 4.5. I met through this experience, which was completely divinely guided, a whole subgroup of people I never would have associated with. These are people who were raised in the foster care system themselves. And I'm talking about the birth mother, this girl who had given birth to this baby I was meant to adopt. In order to get custody of this little girl, who in very sacred ways was revealed that she was to be in our family, I had to go into this really interesting group. These are people who were soliciting transgendered people on Craigslist while I was staying with them. These are people who were majorly part of the drug culture, lots of broken homes, homelessness, extreme poverty, uh, lots of, sexually transmitted diseases. I mean, and thankfully the daughter that I adopted was, her birth mother wasn't into drugs or didn't have diseases or anything, but she associated with these people. And by default, to bring this girl home, I was obligated to go into that. And I remember it kind of launched me into the dark night of the soul later, but I remember when I was going through it, I was like praying, like, why would you ask me to do this? You told me to stand in a holy place. And here I am with all these people. And oh my goodness, did I get a divine slap? It was like, who do you think you are?
Yep. Oh boy.
And
Yes.
if
Do I
I
know
was
that?
here, meaning Christ, if he was here, he would not be sitting in the plush seats in church. He would be with these people. He would be with these people who, the boyfriend of the girl who was pregnant, um, whose baby I would later adopt. This young man, his mother sold him for drugs. He went with his siblings under an overpass to escape sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. I mean,
as a 5-year-old.
yeah.
And I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at this girl who's carrying my daughter, who herself was raised in, her mother went to prison, and she was raised in the foster system and was rejected by several foster parents. And here she is carrying my daughter. And I'm thinking, if I were to apply my righteous standards to these people, they're never going to make it.
Well, and are any standards righteous? And what if your daughter did come
As a drug addicted,
a
yeah.
meth baby, or I mean, here's the thing. We this is what I know about me. Here again, I don't have anybody else's answers. I have my own answers, and I honor those.
Yeah.
I said, give me my money's worth. If I'm going to go into that realm, in other words, if I'm buying a ticket to the full feature film, yeah, give me the soda pop and the popcorn and the reclining chair. But you know what? There's going to be gum under the seat and a sticky floor. And isn't that beautiful? Doesn't everything define each other. Therein lies the perfection. It's my judgments of it that make it imperfect. And yet from a higher perspective, it's beautiful. I've grown more over the difficult things I've gone through. And I have found more peace in letting go of the judgments and comparisons in those situations. And bless your heart. I mean, I eventually remarried. We adopted 2 boys.
Your wife is beautiful. Tanya, that's her name, right?
Tanya. And she's gorgeous inside and out. She's the hero of my story to come in. And that's interesting too. She's of a completely different faith. She doesn't share my beliefs, but in reality we do. We have a common spirituality that goes beyond a belief system. And that's why I don't make light of anyone's beliefs, but I realize their beliefs and that we have diverse beliefs. And yet at the core, we're far more alike as God's children than we ever will be different in our beliefs.
Right.
But what I mean, it's incredibly, everyone's life is perfect. You're incredibly blessed, but what does that mean? I mean, that heroin.
Well, yeah, let's go back because you and I were, you told me the coolest story ever, and I want you to share it with our listeners because I know they'll love it. Talk about how you were sitting in church and it was a meeting where it was what we call a fast and testimony meeting where people come in fasting once a month and they get to go to the stand and share their testimony. So can you walk us through that? I just thought it was
an interesting, this is several years ago, but this certainly was after the accident. This was after I had remarried and adopted children. This was years after the fact, but yeah, I in a church I attend, they would stand up and share. It was an open mic. We called it Open Mic Sunday. What my wife and I would laugh and call it, but and people would get up and they'd say, look, I'm so lucky. Our daughter was coming home from college with a roommate and they had a car rollover and they both walked away. I'm so glad that God blessed me. I'm so glad that I'm righteous and do the things that God has asked me so that I don't have anything bad happen. And we were protected. And then the second was stood up and said, oh my gosh, it was this theme. Our son was T-boned at an intersection and he walked away from the accident. And we're so thankful that we do the right thing and are righteous so that God looks after us and protects us. And this went on. A third one got up and had an issue with the trailer on a family vacation, but it was the same story.
And you're so squirming in your seat.
I'm just sitting there on fire. It's like, I'm so thankful I do everything right so that I have the blessings from heaven to protect me so nothing bad happens. And I couldn't help myself. I got up and
you sound like me in my Sunday school class. I'm squirming and my husband just leans over and goes, just raise your hand. Okay. Just raise your hand.
But I got up and I simply said, look, I had a major assignment or calling in the congregation. I was doing everything right. And I use that term, loosely. I was checking off all the boxes. I was paying my tithes and offerings and attending my meetings and attending, a temple and doing all those things. And I still do many of those things because the symbolisms mean something to me, but I couldn't take it where I stood up and said, look, I did everything right. I crashed the car. I lost half my body and my ability as a man to do the things I used to love to do, like run and work, and half my family was killed. Are you telling me I was not righteous? Are you telling me I wasn't worthy? Are you telling me that I had somewhere dropped the ball? And I did continue to say, look in your Bibles. Gosh, was the master's life easy? We claim he did everything right, and I support that. He didn't have a blessed existence with untold abundance and nothing bad happened. And then I opened to another book that we use in our congregation, which talks about a Ramiyamkin. And folks that would stand up on the Ramiyamkin and say, thank God we're better than everybody else. Thank God that we have more blessings than everyone else. And obviously it probably didn't go over so well. But
I would have been there like, amen, brother, preach.
Yeah. But the ecclesiastical leader in that congregation literally hugged me as I was leaving the pulpit, and then spoke with me after and said, thank you for being honest. I can't tell you how many people sit with me in an ecclesiastical interview or counsel and say, gosh, I'm doing everything right, but my marriage is awful. I'm doing everything right, but I don't have money. I can't pay my bills. I'm doing everything right, but my children have gone astray. I'm doing everything right, but I'm not having the blessings that are promised to me. And it's like, hold on a minute. What is a blessing? What is abundance? What does that really mean? And why do we equate that to material wealth or happiness and joy with no turmoil or challenges?
That's the old prosperity gospel. That's the old, like, if you do this, you're assured to have this.
Well, and sometimes we wave it in each other's faces like, well, look at my abundance in my wealth or my home or my car or my family or my whatever we want to do. Look how the Lord has blessed me because of
And look how my kids have turned out. They've crossed off all the checklists.
Yeah. And so, and here again, this is not in judgment. I don't judge that. I mean, I have learned to stand literally in the middle of the bridge and to stand as love. I certainly love those people. I do.
Absolutely.
I mean, what a beautiful thing for them to embrace and to enjoy and to be proud of. And yet, on the other end of the spectrum, what a beautiful thing, that we have the opposite. There has to be opposites. The duality we live in is what stretches our soul. It's the game we play. Otherwise, how would we know? How would we ever know? But the bottom line to me is the love of the entire universe, of God, whatever you want to call it, supports all of the children here. And we may have made commitments and contracts before we ever came to say, I'm going to be that one. I'll be the one that stretches your heart in ways you'll never imagine. I might break your heart. I might abuse you. I might leave you. I might hurt you. But don't forget who I am. Don't forget that I came here with that agreement that I would teach you forgiveness, or I would teach you self-worth. I mean, here's the funny thing. I preach of this unconditional love. And I say preach because I feel like I'm on a soapbox right now. I'm sitting in front of my computer, but I still didn't get it. With everything that happened to me and with all the examples of unconditional love, and even with my children and Spencer, my son, he never had an experience. He never had a dream or a visitation. He lost everything I did. And he came to me at one point and he just like, Dad, I don't even believe it. I mean, I never got he was about 20 and he said, for 12 years, I begged God every day, just let me see Mom. Just let me feel her once. And he said, I got nothing. He said, I beat my knuckles bloody on that door and it never opened. So either you're making it up and lying, or you're incredibly deceived, or if there's a greater power, it doesn't care about me because I got nothing. And, it drove me to my knees. I pray. I said, God, listen, I'll give it all away. Give him something. Give him some light. And I got a slap. God said, why are you judging your son? Judge not that you be not judged. Why do you think that your life or your experience is better than his, or that what you have is better than what he's having? Don't you know I've got him? Don't you know this is perfect for his soul's expansion? Don't you know that this is exactly what he created to experience, and we love him enough to support it, that he'll have what he bought his ticket for in this life? And so it was very close to home in many ways. And our lives are perfect. There's no need to judge each other.
Yeah, that is the thing that I learned when I had to go to these children's shelters. And I was in Stockton, California, which is like, they have a surplus of foster kids and not enough homes. So I would go to these children's shelters in San Joaquin County and I would just hear wailing. And wailing because these children who were separated from their families, and the families are, the parents are struggling with an addiction and they're wailing and they want to be with their child. And then I have this little 4-month-old daughter. I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment with her. And when I finally got custody of her, it came together for me. Like Madison, her birth mother, she is a very noble soul.
Yeah. Yep.
There was no chance for her in the lens of, traditional material success or warmth or human connection because of what she descended into. But this is a giant soul. And I'll share this with you. I haven't actually spoke this out loud, so it's really cool that I get to share it with you here because I feel safe. um, I there's a book called The Little Soul in the Earth. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's a
Little
children's
Soul in the
book.
Sun. I know it well.
Little Soul in the
Yes.
Sun. Yes, that's it. The Little Soul in the Sun. And it talks about how these people, these souls, they're making this little contract like little angels, and they're like, "Hey, I'm gonna like I love you so much that I'm gonna show you this like you said, what forgiveness is like, or what it means to resolve things or whatever." However, they made this pact. I totally know that I did that with her because no one tested me to the limits like this girl. And what's interesting is when I was waiting for all this to play out, and I was kind of in that wilderness of not knowing what was going to happen. I had a dream. And in the dream, I was sitting in a conference room. I know it was symbolic, but I was sitting in a conference room and I was watching this woman give everyone's jaw was dropped. She was giving the most incredible presentation. She had charts. She was pointing to things. And as I zeroed in on her, she was absolutely stunning and so confident and so beautiful. And her hair was perfect, and it was like kind of like a bob, and she was just really sharp looking. And then I woke up and I wrote it down because I don't typically remember a lot of dreams. I knew that I knew this lady and I really respected her. Here's the crazy thing, Jeff. Recently, I went on Madison's Facebook. I've had to block her for various reasons, but she's now married and she's pregnant with her own little girl. And we've stayed in sporadic touch, but I've had to keep it pretty closed as an adoption for safety reasons because of some of the people she associates with. But anyway, I was looking through her pictures, and I kid you not, there's an old picture of her where her hair is exactly like that girl in the dream. She's wearing almost an identical outfit. And this is back in the days before some of her illnesses hit. I got chills all the way through me. And it was almost as if I had this complete, knowing that this soul is so amazing.
Yeah.
And she had to come down in this construct and with these circumstances to grow the people around her.
Yes. Yes. I mean, we will never encounter anyone that is a mere mortal. I mean, we are all divine, radiant beings. And yet the self-love, that's what I was getting at beforehand too, is even with all that I had experienced, all this love, experiencing all the unconditional love. The crazy thing is I was so hard on myself. I didn't love myself unconditionally. I was still searching for where's love? Who can validate me out there? Where does it come from? And once again, back to the master, love your neighbor as yourself. And of course, well, who's my neighbor? The beautiful parable about your enemy, the one that you think is different, the Samaritan who stops. I mean, this is it. The whole parable is put aside your differences, put aside your belief systems, and embrace love. And then you can only love your neighbor as yourself. So how can I possibly give what I don't have? If I don't have self-love, I mean, this is what's beautiful. I think if you look at these grand examples, here you have someone show up and say, look, I'm the Son of God. Come and do the things I do. Come and follow me. Do these things. Come on, Peter, walk on the water. Why do you doubt? Greater things will you do than I if you just believe, if you just step into your divinity and you embrace your own divine nature. You embrace your own lineage of a divine, creator, and stand up and be the radiant being of light that you are. And that might look different for everybody. That might look like a unwed mother who's doing it her way because that was the expression and expansion of her soul. And it might look like something else on the other end. And it's the judgments of all that causes all the problem. And I firmly embrace that it's our judgments. It's not the creator's. It's just ours.
Yeah. And actually, don't you think that Jesus wanted the depth of human experience? He wanted he sought after, the lepers and the woman in adultery, and then even the Pharisaical people, like he tried to get to them too.
Yeah.
you know Everyone. And I kind of look at my life and I'm like, I know someone taken in adultery, I know someone dripping with disease, I know someone who needs seven, I know these people. I know the super orthodoxy Pharisee people who are like, yep, our way is right.
Yeah.
Yep, you can only find Christ this way. This is the only way. And I'm really passionate about it now because, as you have stated, like that empathy, it's about that mercy and that love. And there's so many different like salvation theories. And so we just get in such fear around, am I going to make it? Are my loved ones going to make it?
Well, fear. There's two great energies in the universe: fear and love.
Mm-hmm.
And really, there's only love. But I often ask myself, am I operating out of fear or am I operating out of love? And when you talk about this empathy thing, I mean, that's big to me. When I was in the hospital, out of my body, and literally experiencing, and when I say that, I mean that. I passed a nurse. I felt her abuse. I felt what that had done to her as a young girl, and what she had decided about herself because of all that had happened. And yet I was seeing her as this glorious, giving, soul here in a hospital. I mean, healing people are seeing to their needs and tending to their wounds. It was, but suddenly, like I said, I was her.
Mm-hmm.
I was her. And the empathy, having experienced what she experienced in her life and knowing why she walked in the way she did. I mean, and feeling it, there's no judgment. When there's pure empathy, there's no judgment.
Right.
And from my background, this at-one-ment, this atonement was so much about empathy. I mean, so much about, I want the breadth and depth of the human experience, that I might have comprehension of all things, that I might have mercy in all situations, that I might know how to succor people, how to reach out without judgment, because I know their path. I've walked in their shoes. They are me, I am them, we are one. And judgment goes out the window. When your birth mother, yeah, it was trying and testing, and there's always consequence to choice. But at the end of the day,
yeah,
at the end of the day, the empathy, you say, wow, what a beautiful soul. You saw her in her magnificence. And that's who she is. The stuff that goes on here is just stuff that happens.
We are all angels.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're all in this form, this dense material form, and we're trying to just make sense of it and make sense of what's going on around us. And like you said, with that fear, it's like, if I really just loved people, there's a fear that won't line up. If I just went into a space of unconditional love and I didn't cross my T's or dot my I's in this other arena, you could call it a checklist, you could call it a set of laws or dictates or doctrines or policies or principles. If I just loved, then everything else would fall apart. And I think that's such the interesting paradox in all of this, because those laws, rules, principles, policies, and commandments are enforced so that we can love.
Well, yeah, I often laugh in my theology. There's this philosophy that says, let's make them obey and not one will be lost, which was, a very different energy than, let's provide free will and choice. And by their own experience, they'll learn. But otherwise, how would you know? That was in the arms of all that love. I mean, it was like, look how much you're loved. Look how your life is a gift. You're putting all these judgments on it. And even when you said, if we could just unconditionally love others, if we could just unconditionally love ourselves.
Right.
I mean, it's so funny when I finally decided I was worthy. Suddenly,
what a charged word! Oh my goodness, what a charged word that word is.
When I stopped trying to be a good person, I became a much better person. I suppose you could say, well, that's all on the inside. This is all internal work. It's
Yeah.
all internal work. And that's, I've studied all kinds of different religions and belief systems. And actually, quite honestly, although, I sometimes make light of a belief, I love ceremony. I love the beauty of it all. I love the beauty that's found in symbols and ceremony and the things that you can align with those. And for instance, I've looked at temples all over the world and temple worship in all different belief systems. And nowhere you go and look out the window for your answers outside. Everywhere you go internal, you go into the Holy of Holies, you commune with that inner voice that has your answers, that where truth is found, where you become enlightened, not by someone else, but
It's
by
the kingdom of God within. It's the Holy of Holies within.
by your own knowing. And when you know what you know, nobody can take that away. It doesn't matter anymore what anyone says or anyone thinks.
And that was your knowing. That was the book title. That was like, hey, nobody can take my divinity from me, what I experience with the divine and the way I experience it.
Yeah.
That is the gift that no one can take. And like you had said so beautifully, like everything is in perfect divine order. And you are the one that created that, you and God.
Yeah. Yeah. Co-created for the perfect experience, for my soul's expansion in a realm of eternal lives. I mean, I wonder if we're ever going to get sick of this and just say, we'll probably always have challenges. We'll probably always have ways to grow.
And we can't make that a reflection on our worth.
No.
Or our performance. I mean, like you were saying before, if we're doing quote unquote everything right, why isn't XYZ lining up? When in actuality, God only wants our growth.
Yep.
And we want to have contribution to the world. Well, we can't. Let me look what you're doing with the world, with your influence and the power, with the wisdom and what you're holding. It's like once you wake up, once you have your own knowing of your soul's worth and your own connection to the divine, you're naturally going to share it. It might be with your own sphere in your private community, but it might be with a bigger microphone.
Yeah. Well,
No one can take that from you. And it's like for me right now, I have to do this podcast. Like I have to write this book and I have to do this podcast. I have to do these courses because I just am bursting with, I never recognized my worth before, and it's still a work in progress. And probably even for you, like, okay, like this is the battle. This is it.
It probably always will be. And I hate to interrupt, but this is the beautiful thing, Sheree, about what you're doing. You don't have to do anything, but you're choosing to do it. You're choosing to do it. And the same, I would have never written a book. I'm not that. I was approached by a publisher. I did the work. I wrote the book, but the little things are the big things, just like you said, in your own community, gosh, in your own home. I mean, people have said to me, oh, you must have been spared for a magnificent cause. You were a dead man and you came back. And I say, yeah, to hold my wife's hand or play catch with my son or watch that next sunset and realize that I'll never see that sunset in that way ever, ever, ever again. And suddenly, heaven's right here. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to hope for. It's like I can embrace it right here. And
it reminds me of that quote, what you are seeking is seeking you.
Yeah. Yep.
And you are what you seek.
Well, and it gives a whole new meaning to consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither spin nor do they toil.
I have lilies on my desk to remind me of that scripture.
Well, and yet they're far. I mean, be ye therefore perfect. There was nothing to become. He didn't say become. Embrace the perfection that you are and that we are and that everything is around you because God created it and called it good. And we're here to have our experience And I don't care what religion you look at this through. I'm speaking through a Christian realm because I'm familiar with the Bible and scriptures like that. But I've also looked
You're
into,
like me. You identify with Buddhism. You identify with
right,
Gnosticism. You
right.
identify with Judaism and Christianism.
I tell you,
Christendom.
the Native American sacred ceremonies
Yes,
probably.
and you're a shaman.
I,
You do
I
that kind of
was
work.
I was given shamanic rites through the Munaki and through what they say was ancient that came across the Bering Strait, their belief system, which is sacred to them. Gosh, can I not honor that? Can I not stand and honor where someone else stands without having to place judgments or right or wrong on it?
Right. And I love the diversity. I mean, I travel and I've lived I lived in New Zealand, and I really, one of my best friends is Maori, and she's taught me a lot about how, the colonization that tries to happen both in the religion and within the country. And I think the only way that we're really going to heal is to find our commonalities and honor whatever it is we believe. This polarization that happens because no one's fitting into this one way is not what's going to bring about quote unquote Zion or the paradise we're all seeking.
Yeah.
Um, and I get really, I get triggered when people are like, it'll all work out in the next life. And I've talked about this before. Like, what about right now?
Yeah.
What if we just let go of everything but charity? And it just, and this coming from someone, like, I need to preach to myself, because I am not one of those people who, I'm more left brain. I'm more of a skeptic by nature. I'm very sensitive and empathic, trust me, but because of the gifts of empathy and which is different than being a true empath, I
Right.
have both of that going on. And that's why I keep people at a distance sometimes, because I
Mm-hmm.
can feel distortion along with someone's light. And when you were talking about being in the hospital and being able to see this, was it a nurse where you could
Yeah.
feel her abuse? My whole goal in life is to see everyone's light, to see, I don't care what they look like. I'll be straight with you. I have two brothers that are totally tatted up. They struggle with addictions. They've both served time in rehabilitation centers and psychiatric facilities. In fact, one of my brothers was just barely released from a psychiatric facility. And another brother that's in recovery from alcoholism, severe. Like, their hearts, I'm telling you, I'm going to get emotional. Um, their hearts are massive,
Yeah. Yeah.
massive.
How lucky are you? How blessed are you to have these great and noble ones?
Absolutely. And I
Who
lost a
said,
sister
send
to
me, I'll do
suicide
that.
who had the same kind of heart.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll go there and be that guy that
Yeah.
you might learn to love, that you might embrace charity, that you might really know in such a way that otherwise you never would have.
Yeah.
And then we can take that wisdom and we can move
And
forward with it.
they are really turned off by religion because they felt judgment. And so I'm like you. I see myself, and I love what you talked about before about you see yourself as a bridge builder, bringing people together, letting go of the distortion and the dissension and the anger and the malice around belief systems and all these things, and just being like, hey, I know, as tried as a child would say, why can't we all just get along?
Yeah, can't we? Can't you come out and play?
Yeah.
And here again, it's the judgments we put on it, but it's easier said than done, as you well know.
Yeah.
And yet there is great peace in letting go of those judgments and
Of
those.
that dogma, and just knowing Christ, he taught in parables, he taught in stories, he never answered things directly. He always, unless he was calling something out, but he largely taught through inquiry, through going within and asking and reversing questions. And so I'm getting to a space in my life where I love mystery, and I'm okay with it, and trying, to lean more towards being, erring on the side of love and acceptance and radical inclusion versus, oh my gosh, gather all your loved ones before it's running out of time or it's too late. Like if we don't all go on the same path together, we're not going to make it back to each other in the afterlife.
Yeah. Well, and here again, are we operating out of fear or love? And there's always that voice, and we can call it religion. It's the voice that says, run, hide, cover yourself up, be ashamed. You're no good. You're never going to make it. Or there's another voice that says, you're already in the book of life. You're already there. Yeah. Embrace the divinity that you are. Be ye therefore perfect, just like the lilies, and embrace that, yep, I'm a different color, or I'm unique in my own beliefs. I'm unique in my own features. I'm unique in the whole vibration I bring. I laugh about the universe. Una meaning one, and verse meaning song. There's one song. There's one song, and we each carry our tone, our vibration, our unique melody. But it's the chorus of it all that becomes so beautiful. I was listening the other day on the radio. I don't even know who sings it. It was probably Amy Grant or something, but she was saying, we're beautiful, the mess we are.
That is Amy Grant.
Yeah, we cry out our agony, and God just sees a melody. Look at my children. Look at my children. They're learning to walk. Aren't they beautiful? Aren't they glorious? I mean, my little Griffin, when we were on the Easter vacation just before the accident, it was the Monday after Easter that we crashed the car, and Easter's coming up, so it's a very time of year for me. He was, he'd take a few steps, he'd fall down, he'd crawl, he'd pull himself up, he's slobbering, he's bumped his head. He would pick up the colored eggs. We have a tradition of hiding colored eggs in the garden. And he would bring them to me, and he would say, Dad, ball. Totally innocent. And I see him, we wander around this life slobbering, falling down, bumping our heads, and calling eggs balls. Because we just don't know any better. But what a magnificent innocence. And I believe that's how the entire universe looks at us. Look at my beautiful children. Yep, that one fell down. That one's slobbering. This one thinks that eggs are balls. But aren't they magnificent? And aren't they mine? And I'm grateful that we're all one and connected.
Yes, and out of the mouth of babes, honestly, if we can know more, the children are the kingdom, children are charity, children do have the knowing. They are our teachers. Yesterday,
we keep referring to the master. Yeah, bring the children in. This is what the kingdom of God is.
This is it.
I read the Lost Book of Thomas, and he said the kingdom of God is like unto children wandering naked in a field who have no shame.
Oh, well, I'm definitely running in the field. I don't know about the shame part. Well, it's interesting. Yesterday we heard a siren, and my 6-year-old and 4-year-old ran to the window, and I said, you know what? Whenever I hear a siren, I say a prayer, because that means somebody's hurt, or they're scared, and they both just looked at me like deer in the headlight, 4 and 6-year-old. And I just walked back in the kitchen, and they were like, wait. Eli comes to me, my 6-year-old, and he's like, Mom, let's say a prayer for them right now.
Yeah.
And he literally got into prayer stance, and I was like, oh, okay. And the most beautiful prayer came out. It was so simple. Heavenly Father, please bless those people. They don't feel sad and scared. Amen.
Yeah. Well, that is the...
I'm like, if we could just sum up the secret of the universe.
Is there any more powerful prayer? Without judgment. Gosh, maybe it was a drug overdose. Maybe someone beat their child. Maybe someone beat their wife. Maybe someone was beaten.
Yeah, maybe somebody's turned over.
Yeah.
Pinned under the wheel of an accident.
Yeah, send love and light. Send love and light regardless of the situation, because we love each other and we deserve it, right?
Yeah, and there's no greater way to end our discussion than with that. We do deserve it. We are worthy. We are that which we seek. We are the divine. And would you say that was part of your knowing?
Amen. Yes, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. That's the key. Embrace your own divinity. Embrace who you truly are instead of what happens or what you did or what you didn't do. and realize that, tomorrow's a brand new day. You can make a brand new choice. If something isn't working in your life, without judgment of it, if it's not working, then make a different choice and let it go. Forgive yourself and move on. And there's going to be consequence to everything. There's even consequence in things you might think are good. But
absolutely,
let's let all that judgment go and embrace our divinity and treat each others and see the divinity in all others.
Which is exactly what Christ was trying to teach us. Ye are gods.
Yes.
The kingdom of God is in you.
Yep. Yeah.
And better things that I've done, you can do, or something to that effect that he said.
He even said greater. It's like,
Greater.
Here's the funny thing, that he held up a mirror to show us our magnificence and our divinity, not to diminish that. He never thumbed his nose and said, hey, I'm Dad's favorite, neener.
Yeah, he didn't have the ego of worship me.
No, he was saying, look, come, do these things. We're all in this together. There's no stepchildren.
There's no redheaded stepchild in the eternity.
Yeah, come and do this. He might have got anxious about hypocrisy within religion or within ceremony, but there was very little judgment ever of anyone, time and time again. And in doing that, he inspired people to really embrace their own divinity, their own magnificence, and be far greater than they were in their judgments and in their comparisons.
Absolutely. And just that holy of holies that resides at the seat of our soul and the recesses of our hearts, that we are what we are reaching for. We need to access that. And God is there. And Christ is the presence with that. And so thank you. I just am going to invite everyone again to go get your book, Knowing. What is the subtitle of it? There was a subtitle.
It's Knowing. It's the incredible journey of going beyond the veil. I did get to take a peek in what's next, and then choosing joy after tragic loss. Seeing the blessing and being grateful for what I have instead of everything that I don't have. And
beautiful.
It's available.
And just coming back to look at that sunset and hold your wife's hands. And
those are the big things.
Simplicity that children teach us.
Yeah. Yes, it really is. It really is quite simple.
I really think that's why I always thought God was playing a cosmic joke on me by giving me these two little ones later in life, because Eli was born when I was 43 and Emma came when I was 45 and a half. A half. I have to add the half in there because right. I was old. I was older.
That's 6 whole months. That's worth it.
But as I'm looking at them now in my busyness to check off the list and get things done, do my purpose, on such an avid, zealous path. I just sometimes they are the reminder. That if that's the only thing they're here to teach me, fantastic. I have to have eyes to see and ears to hear that is the whole purpose of life, is to love and to connect to other beings.
It's beautiful. Yep. And that breeds gratitude. And when I'm grateful, I have very little time for being judgmental or mad or angry or hurt. So. And
you're alive. You feel alive. So. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you made it. I'm glad you pulled through, and I'm glad you came back, because what you're doing is important. It's timely. We need this messaging. We need this presence. You have a lot of sacred male energy, which is a rarity. You also have a lot of divine feminine energy, which is even more a rarity in a guy. So,
I am both. I am all of it. I am that I am. And when I say that, that's not to be confused, It has nothing to do with preference or anything else. It has to do with the fact that there's so many symbols in all of that, even in the Adam and Eve story.
Yeah, because you're both, right? We are both of them.
I'm both of it. I view Eve as my feminine energy, my flesh, my desire, my sensuality. My Adam is more of perhaps a connected energy who wants to remain connected, but it's crazy. I'm both of it. I'm all of it. And that's just it.
It's not about gender, is it? It's about inner alignment.
No, No, it's about inner alignment. And that's, again, that's one of my answers. Doesn't mean that's everybody's answer, but there's deep symbols in everything we look at and read. And even in that sunset, there's deep symbolism if we're open to receive it.
Absolutely. And all of our powers and all of our joys in the now.
That's right.
Well, I'm glad my now was with you today.
Oh, thank you. I look forward to talking again sometime.
Thanks so much.
All righty.
Thanks again to Jeff for reminding us that we need to embrace our own divinity. Being right, while it feels really good, is not the purpose of life. It's to take a breath, go within, find our home base inside, that holy of holies, and to embrace our life, our being, and our very existence as a gift. Every day is a gift. If you've ever lost anyone you love, you know that. Every day is a precious gift. I want to remind you that I do have 2 online courses that help you make your life feel more like a gift and bring you back into the present and help you experience that inner and outer alignment, the 22-day depression cleanse and the emotional wholeness masterclass. So go to my website, cherieburton.com, and check those out. Until next time,